Hey there, I'm Lydia.
And I'm Tim.
Today we're going to talk about Oneitis, what Oneitis is, and how to cure it, and how you can ask a girl out without suffering from Oneitis.
Welcome to the Love Openly podcast. We're Tim and Lidia, dating and relationship coaches from Love Openly. In each episode, we discuss all things to do with the modern day dating and relationships. Our goal is to give you practical tips and strategy that you can implement in your dating and relationships in order to finally get mastery over your love life.
Oh, yeah. An example of oneitis from my life. I can remember when I was at school and I was about 15 years old, and I used to sit with this girl in science class, and we used to kind of flirt a little bit with each other. She was kind of into me and I was kind of into her, and we used to kind of play around. And I remember one time in physics, I think it was physics, and she created this, for some reason we had wax and we were sat next to each other, and she created this tiny little heart out of wax, and then she gave it to me, and I took that heart and I put it in a box and I kept it for like 10 years, which was like really kind of ridiculous thinking back. But, you know, in the time after I was with this girl, like spending time with her in the class, I would go home and I would think about this girl obsessively. And I just couldn't get her off my mind. And that lasted for 2 years until after about 2 years, I finally told her that I was in love with her, and she had no idea, and it was a bit of a disaster.
So, some might still wonder what Oneitis exactly is, So what he described here is basically having really strong feelings for women or men, and, just like being obsessively like thinking about the person and just couldn't really do anything else for like extended period of time because you're so into that person. So that's usually like what oneitis is, like how it's defined.
So the modern version of oneitis these days is typically it's going to happen with online dating. So you know what I'm talking about if you're a guy. When you start off with online dating, it's you don't really know what you're doing. So you'll do some swiping, you'll try and get some matches, and it'll be a lot of work to get those matches probably. Unless for some reason you look on having a good profile. But you're going to struggle to get those matches. And then eventually, finally, you get that match with somebody who you think looks nice. And you start chatting to her. And she starts chatting back. And you're like, wow, this is it. This is amazing. Like, and you get really excited. And then you keep talking to her, and then you're just like, oh, I found somebody. I found this girl. Like, oh, she's really amazing. Like, and you start planning and looking forward about how you're going to meet up, what you're going to do, and you're just rushing into all these kind of ideas in your head, and then she stops talking to you, and you're like, well, no, what are you doing? Like, come back, and you're just going crazy thinking about it all the time. You're trying to understand why she hasn't talked to you yet, and what's going to happen? Who's going to have? How many kids are you going to have? And all this kind of stuff. And then meanwhile, it's only been like, you only met her like 2 days ago. And you're just basically just getting completely infatuated with somebody. I mean,
it could be with somebody who you haven't met yet.
Yeah. So on online dating, this definitely happened a lot to me when I started doing online dating. And
it happens to women as well, if you have this slight chance of like things working out, you kind of like hope that it will really work out well to give you what you've been dreaming about, like about your relationship, having a proper committed, like stable relationship with someone. You just really hope that that person is, like that's someone you're looking for. Then, when it doesn't work out, like, or even if it is working out, you just obsessively think about every single word like he's saying to you or she's saying to you, and just go a bit crazy about it, And usually it doesn't really work out well, like, in the end. So that, it just destroys, like, breaks your heart.
Well, unless you follow our advice, which we're going to go through. But before we get to that, what is, like, why is it called oneitis?
So, oneitis, I think it's the term, like, mostly used by the pickup community. But it seems like in online space, like outside the pickup community, is becoming like more and more like common, like for people to use it to describe this like situation.
Yeah, because it sounds like some kind of disease, like, you know, like bronchitis,
Yes, so,
conjunctivitis.
yes, basically, you know, like this itis is like used for a disease and is added to one. So you just like obsessed with this one person. So it's almost like described as something really like negative, like disease, something you need to get over and cure.
Okay, and is this just like a rare thing that happens, or like we know it happens on online dating, but what about in your social circle?
Every living person on earth has experienced it at least like once in their life, because it's literally you getting really excited about somebody, you know?
Yeah.
So it could happen with like somebody who you're like already friends with, or it could happen with somebody you just started to talk or like, you know, went on a date with, or it could happen to somebody you haven't met yet, and it could just happen with anybody you start to develop feeling for, you know, whether they're from your existing social group or from online dating, you know, even somebody who you haven't met yet.
But then doesn't that mean that it's always oneitis? When is it not oneitis?
So, having strong feelings for somebody and developing strong feelings for someone, you can't just say it's like all oneitis and you need to cure it, especially so if there are mutual like feelings or, you know, attraction going on. Then it's usually like really normal that that feeling, initial feeling, are really intense from both parties. So I think, you know, like you have to be really careful about having strong feelings, you know, calling having strong feeling like oneitis, like all the time, because then you just cut out of this, you know, opportunity of developing feeling for someone.
Right. So we're talking about something that's typically one-sided, so it's usually one person being into the other person.
So usually oneitis feels like really uncontrollable and really intense and strong. So sometimes you feel like you can't stop yourself from obsessing over somebody, even if you might think that you yourself is a bit creepy, being a bit creepy, but like, you just can't stop this feeling because it's too strong, right? Well, we'd like to tell you here that it's controllable. And it's kind of curable in a way. I mean, like using the term other people use.
Yeah.
If you know, like, why it happens and how you can control it and what you can do about it, which is what we're going to talk about.
So I think the first thing that you need to know is that oneitis is something that happens in your head, right? It's fantasy, more or less. It's about how you think about that person and how you think they might be, rather than how they actually are. And that's an important distinction because, you know, because like infatuation, I mean, that's you know, getting into your mind and like you're playing out these scenarios in your head over and over and over and over, and then attaching like feelings to those stories that are happening in your head that aren't actually happening in real life. So one of the ways to control this is to acknowledge that that's actually happening first and foremost, you know? So know that it is a fantasy if you're totally infatuated with someone, and it doesn't necessarily mean that they don't like you or there isn't something happening, because there probably is. But the first thing to deal with oneitis is to know that it is a fantasy, and making things real is the way to progress forward.
Yes. And what just Tim said, you know, is important. Yes, there is this actual person you like, but, you know, you haven't really had much interaction with her, or, you know, you might haven't had any like romantic, you know, relationship develop with her yet, but you thinking too far ahead, having all this like dream and fantasy in your head, then what's happening is you're infatuated with that fantasy you have rather than the person, the actual person. Yeah,
so I mean, in my case, the girl that I sat with in school, she gave me this heart of wax, and I took that as to mean something way more than it was. You know, she basically did that because, you know, we were just flirting. But to me, it meant a lot more than that, and I would hold on to that heart while I was at home, like lying in bed thinking about her and just kind of going crazy. And then ultimately down the road, when she found out I was into her, she was surprised. So one of the things that's important to know here about oneitis is when you're thinking about another person, try to put yourself in their shoes and think about what's going on from their perspective as well as yours, because then that helps you get grounded about what's going on and not stuck in your head so much. It makes you more objective, so you're looking around and saying, okay, well, what's actually happening here? Like, you know, what's different between how things are going on in your head and how things actually are, and try to observe and be conscious and aware of the fact that there's a difference there, and then bring things back to reality. So the other thing that we want to say about oneitis is it's not necessarily a bad thing.
Yeah, because having a strong feeling for someone is the starting point of any kind of relationship. So if you just try to reject yourself from having feelings for somebody only because it's intense and it feels uncontrollable sometimes, that means you basically like blocking yourself from, you know, like being in a relationship, starting a relationship with someone and experiencing that. So having feelings for somebody isn't a bad thing. Like oneitis isn't necessarily a bad thing, like other people say. You just need to learn over and over through practice, like how it happens and how you can control it and just accept the feelings as it is, and, you know, make it more like, you know, real than just being stuck in your fantasy.
Yeah, so I mean, oneitis is kind of like the first part of beginning a relationship with somebody, and the second part, I mean, once you progress through oneitis and you talk to somebody and they mutually let you know that they like you as well, then that's what we call new relationship energy. And it's basically where you're having two people who have oneitis with each other.
Yes.
And, you know, that's a whole different kettle of fish. That's a different ball game. I mean, when it happens to you, it's crazy, right? That's what, you know, all of the love dramas and films in Hollywood are all about that, right? We know about that. Love songs, everything. That's about mutual oneitis. So it's okay to have oneitis with someone, but it means that you need to do something about it. Don't just stop there and then get stuck in your head. Okay?
So I think the problem with oneitis is basically, like we said, having feelings for somebody is not a bad thing, but the fundamental, really critical problem with oneitis is that it kind of stops you from taking any action and doing anything in reality. And you just keep playing all this fantasy in your head, and the other person doesn't really know what's really going on because you're not really taking action. So that's the key difference between oneitis and making it real. You need to like ask a girl out, you know, and you need to express your feelings, and you need to like hang out with that person and try to make it real.
Yeah, and if you do that, then a woman who is, you know, if you're suffering with oneitis with a woman, then know that she can be your girlfriend. But you have to control the oneitis first, otherwise that's going to be difficult. Okay, so the other thing that you should know as well is that, you know, oneitis itself, it's not, although it feels like it at the time, like, you know, if you're suffering with oneitis right now, if you're thinking and infatuated with somebody, like while you're listening to this, know that it's not a one-time thing. You know, you can have this experience with multiple different people, and it's just a natural thing that happens when you meet somebody that you like. It's just a natural thing that happens. Like, you have these emotions, you have these feelings, and it's okay. And know that whatever happens with this particular person, you will meet somebody again, and you will have this feeling again. It's, you know, but that said, like, obviously the person that you're focusing on right now is the person that you're interested in. So let's talk about that. So how do we deal with that? So how can they cure their oneitis so that they can try and start a relationship with their interest?
To start with, I think it's important that you don't deny your feelings and you try not to run away from it, and you try to like stop thinking that it's a disaster, because that makes you kind of like run away from it instead of act on it and just face your feelings. So, you know, like a lot of people and a lot of advice out there try to tell people like oneitis is such a disaster, it's such a negative thing. Or like we said, it's simply having feelings for somebody, but you haven't learned how to control it yet. So just accept that you have those beautiful feelings for someone, and instead of denying it. I think that's the first thing.
You know, I've met like hundreds of guys who have certain mindsets that are kind of more sort of pickup related, And those guys tend to struggle with oneitis because they think it means that they've done something wrong.
And they lost the game.
And that's not the case. It's just you like somebody, and that's fine. That's a good thing, you know. So acknowledge that, know that it's happening. Try not to get stuck in the fantasy of it, but at the same time, don't run away from the fact that you're feeling something, because it's a good thing, and enjoy those feelings. You can enjoy them without them, you know, taking over your life and going, you know, driving you into insanity.
Yeah. And if you're like overly obsessed with someone, like we said, it's mostly the fantasy you have in your head. It's usually like nothing to do with the actual person, but it's more like how you think the relationship has to happen with the person you like. So it's important to distinguish the fantasy from the actual reality.
Yes, and also be open to other possibilities that, you know, even though you are suffering from oneitis, you can still hang out with other women. You can still go to work. You can still carry out your hobbies, even though you might be thinking about them all the time. Just let that go and just accept it. Yeah, it's happening. It's okay.
It's really, it will feel really hard to, you know, shift your focus to something else, but still try to do it. Then you will realize there are a lot of like other areas of your life you could still get the enjoyment out of. And like Tim said, you know, having strong, intense feelings for someone doesn't necessarily mean that that person is the only person you're going to have these feelings for. You will be surprised to know like how it could happen like different times with different people.
Yeah, so I mean, ultimately, dealing with oneitis and solving the problem of oneitis means that you do have to drum up the courage and actually tell them how you feel. Like, ultimately, that will happen.
Yes.
And the best thing that you can do is don't wait.
Yes.
Do it as soon as you can. Now, you know, one of the biggest issues with oneitis is it can go on for years and years and years, and you don't do anything about it, and you get stuck in this fantasy of what could be. And I've been there, you know, I spent years of my life in that situation. And the problem with this is the longer you leave it, then the more chance that you kind of miss the opportunity. You know, they might be into you. But if you don't act on that, if you don't let them know, they might not know, and they might meet somebody else.
Yes.
So just let them know how you feel, and try not to use the fact that they might say no or they might reject you as a reason not to do it. Because that's the other thing. You know, sometimes you might believe that that they're not going to be into you, or that they're too good for you, or something like this. You might have put them on a pedestal. It's a common phrase that people use in dating. And you have to be careful there, because then you're saying that the fantasy is better than real life. And again, that just extends your suffering. So express your feelings to that person.
So we understand that there is actual like fear about rejection, which, you know, you might like struggle about, and asking a girl like who you like out is not easy matter. But that like rejection is a big issue, so that's something we're going to deal with in another podcast. But please, you know, like Tim said, the longer you wait, like the more you're going to suffer for like different reasons. So it's better to, you know, express your feeling. You don't need to make it a, like such a big deal. You could just simply say, you know, you find her cute, attractive, and you like her, and then you'll see where it happens from there. You know.
Okay, so I hope that you've got something from this podcast. Make sure that if you're into somebody, that you let them know how you feel. Do it right away. Don't wait on it. Thanks for listening to the Love Openly podcast. If you like our podcast, hit subscribe, comment, and leave a review on iTunes. If you want to know more, check out our website, loveopenly.net. Be sure to also check out our free confidence course to master your core confidence to get a girlfriend at loveopenly.net/give me confidence. See you on the next podcast.